The night was alive with lights, music, and laughter. The grand hall sparkled like a jewel, every corner shining with gold and crystal. People dressed in the finest clothes moved through the room, chatting, laughing, and sipping expensive drinks. In the middle of all this, a woman quietly carried a tray of drinks. Her clothes were simple, and she didn't speak much. She moved carefully, making sure no one tripped or spilled anything. Most of the guests didn't even notice her. She was just part of the background, one of many people working to make the evening perfect. The richest man in the room, a tall figure with sharp eyes and a confident smile, was hosting the event. He loved attention and always wanted to be the center of it. He looked around the room, seeing everyone enjoying the party. Then his eyes fell on the woman. She was quiet, and she didn't seem to belong among all the glittering people. He laughed quietly to his friends and whispered something meant to be cruel. He said she looked like she didn't even know what kind of party she was at. The others laughed along with him. The woman, hearing this, didn't say a word. She kept carrying her tray, her hands steady, her eyes calm. But inside, something stirred. A quiet strength began to rise, as she had grown up in a small town, where life was simple and people often judged each other too quickly. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to have others assume she couldn't do something just because of the way she looked or where she came from. Over the years, she had learned to ignore the whispers and focus on what she loved. Music had always been her escape. The piano had been her friend, her secret world where she could speak without words. She had spent countless hours practicing, letting her fingers dance across the keys, learning to tell stories with notes and melodies. No one in this hall knew about that part of her life. Not even the wealthy businessman who had just mocked her dot as she moved through the crowd. Serving drinks and helping guests, she noticed how easily people laughed at the rich man's jokes, how quickly they judged her without knowing her. She had seen it before, and it didn't hurt her anymore. She kept her head down and did her work, but she also quietly promised herself that one day she would show them all. Not with anger or words, but with something stronger, her talent. Meanwhile, the businessman continued his evening, smiling and charming the crowd. He didn't notice the quiet determination growing in the woman he had just mocked. He believed he had seen everything, that he knew who belonged in this world and who didn't. He thought he had the power to judge and dismiss anyone who seemed unimportant. Little did he know he had just crossed paths with someone whose strength and talent could not be measured by appearances or wealth. As the night went on, the music in the hall began, and guests started to gather around the grand piano that stood at the center. The woman finished her tasks and moved to the side, watching quietly. She could feel the energy of the room shifting, the anticipation building for the performance that was about to happen. She took a deep breath and let her hands rest for a moment, imagining the piano keys under her fingers. Her heart raced, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. She knew that soon she would have a chance to show the world who she really was. Not through words, but through music, the rich man noticed her again and laughed quietly. He leaned toward his friend and said something about how funny it would be if she even tried to play the piano. The crowd didn't hear him, but the woman did. She didn't react. She simply stepped a little closer to the piano, her mind focusing on the music she had practiced for years. She didn't care about his laughter or the whispers of the guests. In that moment, she was preparing herself for something bigger than any judgment. She was preparing to let her talent speak louder than anyone's words ever could. The air in the hall seemed to hold its breath. Guests were unaware of the storm about to unfold. No one could see what was coming because no one had taken the time to truly notice her before. She had always been quiet, always been underestimated, and that had become her greatest advantage. In the shadows of doubt, she had grown stronger. And now, as she approached the piano, a small smile appeared on her lips. She didn't need anyone's approval, only the courage to do what she loved. The stage was set, the audience unsuspecting, and the woman ready. The rich man, confident and mocking, had no idea that this quiet, overlooked woman would soon command the attention of everyone in the room. In a few moments, the laughter and whispers would stop. Silence would fall. And when she touched the piano, the world would pause and listen. The crowd around the grand piano grew larger. People were chatting excitedly about who would perform first, pointing to the spotlight and admiring the beautiful instrument. The rich man, standing near the piano with his usual confident smile, looked around at the audience. He noticed the quiet woman lingering nearby. Watching the piano as if it held some secret, he leaned toward his friend, his voice dripping with amusement. "Do you think she even knows how to play?" he asked, barely hiding a smirk. "I mean, she's just here serving drinks. This is for people who understand music, not someone like her." His friend laughed, shaking his head, thinking it was a joke. Others in the room, overhearing him, smiled politely or nodded, agreeing with the unspoken assumption that the woman was insignificant. The woman heard his words, but she didn't react with anger or embarrassment. She simply let them wash over her. Over the years, she had learned that people like him could not understand her, and it was not worth her energy to argue. Instead, she focused on the piano, letting her imagination drift to the notes she had played countless times in private. She could feel the shape of each key under her fingers even before touching them. She remembered the hours spent practicing alone, the quiet nights when only the piano and her dreams existed. That music had been her world, and now she was ready to share it. The rich man noticed her moving closer to the piano. He laughed louder this time, gesturing toward her. "Go ahead," he said almost mockingly. "Play something for us. Let's see if the quiet girl has any talent at all." The audience, noticing the exchange, began to look at her with curiosity. Some were amused, others skeptical. No one expected much. After all, she had never performed in front of anyone like this. The woman paused for a moment, standing before the piano. Her heart beat fast, but it wasn't fear. It was the kind of excitement that comes when you know you are about to do something important. She took a deep breath, letting her fingers hover above the keys. She closed her eyes for a brief second, imagining the first note flowing into the air. Then she opened her eyes and sat down on the piano bench, her posture calm and composed. The room was filled with whispers. "She doesn't look like she can play. Who even invited her to this part? I'm curious to see what she does." But as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the room began to change. At first, it was a soft, gentle note, almost like a whisper. The audience paused, some leaning closer to hear better. The rich man smirked at first, thinking it would be weak or clumsy. But then her hands moved with ease, creating a melody that was delicate yet full of emotion. Each note told a story, each chord seemed to carry a feeling that words could never express. The music floated through the hall, reaching every corner. The rich man's smirk slowly faded, his eyebrows furrowed in confusion. How could someone he had dismissed as unimportant produce music so powerful, so moving, with just a few notes? He glanced around at the other guests, realizing that they too were captivated. People who had been laughing a moment ago were now completely silent. Their eyes were fixed on the woman and the piano, watching every movement. Listening to every sound. As she played, the woman's confidence grew. She didn't play for the approval of the audience, and she didn't play to prove anything. She played because the music lived inside her, and now it had a chance to breathe. Her fingers moved gracefully across the keys, creating a harmony that felt both joyful and melancholic, powerful yet tender. It was as if the piano was speaking through her, telling a story of resilience, hope, and quiet strength. The rich man, who had mocked her only minutes before, felt a strange mix of emotions. He realized that he had been wrong, that he had judged her too quickly. He had assumed that appearance and social status were signs of ability. But now he understood that talent could come from anywhere, and that sometimes the quietest people carried the loudest gifts. Guests began to whisper to each other, astonished by the beauty of the music. "Where did she learn to play like that? I've never heard anything so moving. She must have practiced for years." The woman didn't look at them. Her focus remained on the piano, on the story she was telling through her fingers. Every note was deliberate, every pause filled with meaning. The rich man could no longer look away. He had expected amusement, a brief distraction, maybe a small laugh. Instead, he found himself unable to move, unable to speak. The laughter, the chatter, the judgments, all of it had disappeared. For the first time that evening, the room was quiet, truly quiet. The music had captured everyone's attention, and it would not let go until the final note had played. As she continued, the rich man's perspective began to shift. He realized that he had underestimated not only her but the power of passion, dedication, and humility. Talent could not be measured by wealth, by clothing, or by social standing. It came from within, from the heart, and this woman had it in abundance. He felt a mix of awe and shame, knowing that he had been so quick to dismiss her. The melody grew stronger, filling the entire hall with sound and emotion. The audience was completely absorbed, many holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. And as the last note lingered in the air, the woman lifted her hands from the keys, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the silence speak. The room remained still, stunned by what they had just witnessed. It was not just music. It was a message. A reminder that judging someone without knowing their story was a mistake. And it was a beginning, the moment when the quiet woman had begun to change the way the rich man, and everyone else in the room, saw her. The music continued, growing richer and more beautiful with every note. The woman's fingers danced across the piano keys with an ease that seemed almost magical. Each chord told a story, not just of skill, but of her life of quiet struggles, dreams she had held on to in secret, and the countless hours she had spent practicing when no one was watching. Her music carried a depth that words could never describe, and slowly, the entire hall was wrapped in its spell. The rich man, standing near the piano, could not take his eyes off her. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by a mix of astonishment and humility. He realized that his laughter, his assumptions, had been shallow. He had thought he knew the world, but this woman, who had seemed insignificant, was teaching him a lesson he would never forget. Every note she played reminded him that talent and true worth could not be measured by appearances, wealth, or status. Guests in the hall were leaning forward, their eyes wide, mouths slightly open in disbelief. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the beauty and emotion of the music. The whispers and laughter that had filled the room earlier had vanished completely. There was nothing but the sound of the piano and the story it was telling. People who had ignored her, who had walked past her without a thought, were now paying attention. Realizing that they had been wrong to judge her so quickly, the woman played with a confidence that came from years of dedication. She was not playing to impress anyone. She was playing because the music was a part of her, something she could not hide any longer. With every note, she shared a piece of herself, and the audience felt it. Her performance was not just about technical skill. It was about heart, passion, and honesty. And that honesty was what made everyone stop and listen so intently. The rich man, still in shock, began to understand something important. He had lived his life surrounded by people who praised him for what he owned, for the power he held, and for the life he led. But none of that compared to the raw talent and courage he was witnessing now. This woman had nothing in common with his world, and yet she had more power in her music than he had ever known. He felt a pang of regret for mocking her earlier, but he also felt admiration, a deep respect that he could not hide. As the melody rose and fell, the audience was completely captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others stared at her hands in disbelief, watching as her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, bringing the story of her life to life in every note. Every chord seemed to carry emotion, and everyone in the room could feel it. There was no need for words. The music said everything. The woman paused briefly, allowing a soft note to linger in the air. The silence that followed was powerful, almost as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then she continued, her hands moving faster, more passionately. The melody became alive, full of joy, sorrow, hope, and triumph. It was a performance that touched every heart in the room. People who had once laughed at her or dismissed her could not help but be moved by the sheer beauty of what she was creating. The rich man could hardly believe it. He had thought he understood talent, understood people, and yet he had been completely wrong. He had assumed that someone so quiet and simple could never do something extraordinary. Now he realized that he had been blind, not because he lacked sight, but because he had let his pride and prejudice cloud his judgment. In that moment he felt small, humbled, and amazed all at once. By the time the woman played the final notes, the entire hall was silent. The sound of the last chord hung in the air, echoing softly, leaving everyone in a state of awe. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke, as if the music had frozen time. Then slowly the first clap rang out. It was quiet at first, but soon the applause grew louder, filling the hall with a thunderous appreciation. People were standing, some wiping away tears, others smiling in wonder. Every hand clapped, every eye watched her with admiration and respect. The woman stood, taking a deep breath, her face calm and serene. She had shared her gift, and the world had finally noticed. She did not need to say anything. The music had spoken for her. The rich man stepped forward, his expression a mixture of humility and awe. He approached her slowly, unsure of what to say. He had been wrong to judge her, wrong to mock her, and now he realized that true greatness often comes from the most unexpected places. He spoke, his voice quiet but sincere. I was wrong about you. I judged you unfairly, and I see now that I was completely mistaken. Your talent, your music, it is incredible. The woman looked at him, her expression gentle. She nodded, accepting his words, but there was no arrogance in her eyes. She had proven herself not for his approval, but for the truth of her own abilities. The audience continued to applaud, their admiration for her growing with every passing second. People who had doubted her now recognized her courage, her skill, and the heart she had put into her performance. She had transformed the room with her music, and in doing so, she had changed the way everyone saw her. That night, the rich man learned a lesson he would never forget. He realized that talent and worth are not measured by wealth or appearance, but by dedication, passion, and courage. The quiet woman who had once been overlooked had shown him that true greatness often comes in the most unexpected forms. And for the woman, it was a moment of triumph, not just because of the applause, but because she had stayed true to herself, letting her music tell her story in the most powerful way possible. The applause echoed through the grand hall, filling every corner with warmth and admiration. The woman, who had been quiet and overlooked all evening, stood at the piano, taking a small bow. Her face was calm, but inside a quiet happiness bloomed. She had shared her talent, her story, and her heart, and now everyone could see her in a new light. The rich man, who had mocked her just moments ago, stepped forward. Unsure how to express what he was feeling, he finally spoke, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "I was wrong," he said. "I judged you too quickly. I didn't see the gift you have. Your music. It's beyond words. I want to apologize for underestimating you." The woman looked at him and smiled gently. There was no anger, no resentment. She had never needed his approval, but the acknowledgement felt sincere and honest. She simply nodded, letting her calm presence speak louder than words ever could. Other guests, who had laughed or whispered about her earlier, now approached with admiration. Some asked her how she had learned to play so beautifully. Others complimented the emotion and depth in her performance. Every word they spoke was filled with respect, a recognition of something they had failed to see before. She answered politely, never bragging, never exaggerating. She spoke with humility, sharing that she had loved music all her life and had practiced quietly. Away from the eyes of the world, the rich man stood quietly, observing the scene. For the first time, he felt a deep respect for someone not because of their wealth, appearance, or social standing, but simply because of their talent and courage. He realized that the assumptions he had made based on appearances had been wrong, and it was a humbling lesson. He had underestimated her, just as society often underestimates those who do not fit the usual image of success. But tonight he had seen the truth. Talent, dedication, and heart cannot be measured by status or clothing. As the evening continued, people continued to approach her, praising her performance and asking for advice on music. She shared her experiences, speaking of the joy and freedom she found in playing the piano. She encouraged others to pursue their passions quietly, diligently, and with love. Her words, like her music, carried sincerity and wisdom. People listened closely, realizing that her quiet demeanor had always hidden a powerful strength. The rich man, standing nearby, reflected on his own behavior. He had spent so much of his life judging others and assuming he knew everything about the people around him. But tonight had shown him something important. True worth is never obvious at first glance. It is revealed through actions, talent, and the courage to be oneself. He felt a deep gratitude for having witnessed her performance, for it had changed not only his perception of her but also his perception of what really mattered in life. The woman, after receiving the admiration of the guests, quietly moved back toward the side of the room. She did not seek attention or fame. She simply returned to her place, calm and composed. But the impression she had left was unforgettable. People who had once ignored her now spoke of her with respect and admiration. They realized that they had been too quick to judge, and her performance had taught them a lesson about humility and the power of talent. The rich man approached her one final time before leaving the hall. "Your music. It has changed the way I see the world," he said sincerely. "I will never forget this night, and I hope I can learn from it." The woman nodded quietly, her eyes kind and understanding. She had given him more than a lesson in humility. She had shown him the beauty of recognizing and appreciating talent wherever it is found, and the importance of kindness and respect toward others. As the guests slowly left the hall, many were still talking about her performance. They spoke of the quiet woman who had captivated everyone with her music, of how she had turned what they thought was an ordinary night into something extraordinary. People realized that real greatness often comes from unexpected places, and that the most remarkable individuals are not always the loudest or the most obvious. Later that night, as the hall emptied, she stood by the piano for a moment, looking at the keys that had carried her story. She ran her fingers lightly across them, a soft smile on her face. She had faced doubt, mockery, and the judgments of others, but she had stayed true to herself. She had let her talent shine, and in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone in the room. The applause, the admiration, and the respect were not what mattered most. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had remained authentic, honest, and courageous. The rich man, reflecting on the night as he left the hall, felt a change within himself. He had been reminded that appearances are deceptive and that true talent and worth are revealed in action, not status. He realized that everyone has something unique to offer, and that judging someone without knowing them can lead to missing something extraordinary. He felt a sense of gratitude toward the woman for teaching him this lesson in such a powerful and unforgettable way. The story ended with a quiet truth that lingered long after the music had stopped. Real talent, courage, and worth are not always visible at first glance. Sometimes they are hidden behind simplicity, humility, or silence. But when they are finally revealed, they leave a mark that cannot be ignored. The woman had shown the world that night that being true to oneself, nurturing one's passion, and sharing it with others is the greatest way to command respect and touch hearts. Her music, her courage, and her quiet dignity left an impact that would be remembered for years. The hall, once filled with laughter and judgment, had been transformed by the power of her talent. And in the midst of it all, the rich man had learned one of the most important lessons of his life: never underestimate anyone, for greatness often comes from the most unexpected places.